Would you like another biscuit, dear? Of course, by the 1940s, we were doing our bit to help the war effort. £10 donation was made to the Soroptimist Ambulance Fund, and parcels and woolies were sent to various ships and associations. Would you like some more tea? We decided to reduce our annual subscription to £1 1s in 1940, and our speakers would not be invited to our meetings for the duration. Instead, it was decided we would concentrate on giving help to local people and providing aid in any way we could. I must admit I was somewhat surprised when we received £50 of khaki wool to knit for the war effort. Knitting is not one of my strong points, but I was happy to collect and distribute blankets and clothing to the needy, with one poor family having to be clothed from head to toe. And even though we were very thrifty, it still cost £10. We continued to knit throughout the war, with parcels of woolen sent to our local home guard and the deep-sea fishermen. We also sent parcels of gloves, hats and sweaters to the mission for seamen. I must admit to having a soft spot for sailors, and I was pleased that we were able to donate £80 to the Merchant Navy Fund for clothing supplies to go into occupied areas in Europe. In fairness, we didn't confine our activities just to supporting our boys at sea. The Mayor organised a local collection to provide a Spitfire, and needless to say we donated to that, as well as sending £15 to the Lord Mayor of London's Air Raid Relief Fund. Those poor people. Every day we heard about the terrible destruction caused by the Blitz, and my heart goes out to all those who have lost their homes. It wasn't just knitting and sewing which kept us busy. Invitations were sent to women who were strangers in the town and were here because of the war. We also had a rota so members could help at the American Red Cross Donut Dugout Shop. And together with S.I. Ilkley, we organised an outing for wounded American soldiers. Those boys were so grateful and so sweet, and I have to admit we enjoyed the chocolate they gave us, even if it didn't taste like Cadbury's. Of course, all those donations from the club meant lots of fundraising, and we had a super garden party where we sold sheets, silk stockings, and a bottle of brandy and one of whiskey. Heavens knows where these all came from, but they were all snapped up. We also had club raffles where Miss Bottomley donated a pair of cami knickers as a prize. I was sorry not to win them, but I did win a packet of cigarettes. Sadly, I'm smoking far too much these days, as you can hear, but there is a war on. We were not just concerned with the war effort, and club business continued. Miss Naomi Jacob was made an honorary member at one of our annual dinners, and we continued to debate issues which were of grave importance to our members. In 1944, we made a submission to standing conference asking for equal pay for equal work. So many young women were serving in the forces and doing heavy factory work, so it seemed wrong that they didn't receive the same pay as the men. My dear niece Mary has joined the Women's Royal Naval Service to do her bit and worked every bit as hard as the young sailors, although some of her letters give the impression that she spends a lot of time going to parties and enjoying herself far too much. I just hope she doesn't disgrace the family with all these goings-on. Still, I am a broad-minded woman, and I remember some of the things we got up to in the Great War. which I'm certainly not going to share with you. During the war, we were also looking to our future, and in 1942 we set up the Building Fund, as we wanted somewhere of our own, where we could meet. The end of the war was greeted with great relief, although rationing was to continue for several years. Our charter dinner in 1945 was held at the Imperial Cafe at a cost of 7 and 6 plus tip, and it was a super occasion. Post-war, we supported a number of charitable appeals. Soroptimist head office asked for financial help for fellow Soroptimists in liberated Europe, and we continued to support the post-war relief fund for Soroptimists and distressed businesswomen across the continent. We also sent a sizable donation to the Council and British Societies for their work in providing food relief. People were starving, as so many farms had been destroyed and food production disrupted by the fighting. A member from SI Norway gave us a very moving account of conditions of life before, during and after the occupation. On a lighter note, thank goodness the knitting club finally ran out of wool. We continue to be busy and active. 100 books were sent to women prisoners in different prisons, and we donated 20 guineas to the YWCA to support their work. In 1948, we sent a petition to admit women to the House of Lords. The Building Fund had also reached £586, so we could start look for suitable properties, which was very exciting. Unfortunately, I must end on a more sombre note. In February 1947, Dr. Kathleen Rutherford, who was one of our founder members and our first president, sent a letter of resignation. She was asked to reconsider, but in January 1949 she resigned on health grounds. We also heard that our Hungarian sisters in Budapest had been forced to close their club due to their activities. Life under the Soviets must be very difficult. Oh well, life in the 1940s was never dull, and I will raise a glass to the 1950s. Let the good times roll. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to make another pot of tea. Madam President will be here very shortly.
The 1950s started grey and brown, with rationing and a country struggling to recover from World War II. By the end of the decade, rationing had ended. Fashions were colourful. Pop music was emerging to lead us into the swinging 60s. But what happened in between? The coronation of Princess Elizabeth. Everest was conquered. The Cold War began. The Korean War was underway. We presume that the Soroptimists were not climbing Everest or taking part in active service. So what were they doing? In 1954, they found a new home at 5 Park Place. Not only did it provide them with comfortable meeting rooms, but it allowed them to convert the rest of the house into flats that were rented to retired Soroptimists at reasonable rents. They were, as ever, very active in fundraising and keeping abreast of the day-to-day problems affecting people both locally and nationally. There were regular long and lively meetings at 5 Park Place as the club continued to carry out a formidable number of good works in its own quiet way. The ladies were well aware that although Harrogate had a reputation for being quite a wealthy area, there were families who were really struggling to cope. Throughout the decade, they packed, on average, 50 boxes a year containing food and other essentials that were gratefully received by families who were really finding it hard to recover from the shortages brought about by war and often the loss of their menfolk. 1954 saw the 21st birthday of the Soroptimists, which was celebrated with a grand gala dinner. Ladies were dressed in gowns made from yards of taffeta, and of course the ubiquitous long gloves. In 1957, at the annual gala dinner, presidents from 15 branches attended, and Mr. K.W. Fleming, president of Harrogate Rotary Club, said, "A woman's strength lies in her influence, and it is in organisations like the Soroptimists that her influence counts for most in life." And Soroptimists continue to follow this value today.